Daf Tesvav Amud Aleph, second line from the top. We're in the middle of the sugya trying to analyze Rav Meir's statement in the Mishnah that he says, from their words you can learn out that you can burn Truma Tahira and Truma Tameya on Erev Pesach. So Reish Lakish offers a different interpretation than we had before. Amar Reish Lakish Mishum Bar Kapara Masnisen Ba'ava Tuma Deraisa V'Lada Tuma Deraisa. Reish Lakish says we don't have to limit it to the teretz that we said before, to the approach that I said before, that the Mishnah is talking about a avatuma deraisa and a vladatuma derabanan. No, the Mishnah is talking kipshuta, it's avatuma deraisa, vladatuma deraisa, that in both cases the meat of the kachim on a deraisa level were tome. And in Chanami, you cannot learn out from there that you can burn Tuma Tmeya with Tahira, because in the case of the Mishnah of V'chinis Gana Kahanim, they were both Tome. Different levels of Tuma, but both Tome. Rather, what we said, Rav Meir says, Medivreihem, it's not referring to V'chinis Gana Kahanim. Umay Medivreihem, what does it mean, Medivreihem? Medivre Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yeshua. Is from the words of Rabbi Elazar Yeshua, which we'll see momentarily. From there, we learn out that the din of Truma on Erev Pesach. Rabbi Yeshua, which case of Rabbi Yeshua are you referring to? Ilema ha Rabbi Yeshua. From the following, it's not Chavish shel Truma shenoi la safek Tuma. If you have a barrel of Truma that had a safek Tuma occurred to it, it came into contact with a safek Tuma, or mesupek if it came into contact with Tuma. So it's a din of a safek. Rabbi Elazar says, if it was lying in an exposed area where it was likely to acquire definite Tuma, you should put it in an area which is concealed. If it was uncovered, if it was Megula, then you cover it and protect it against Tuma. So even though it had a safek Tuma, you still have a chiyuv to protect it, so it doesn't come into contact with definite Tuma. But Rav Yeshua says no, that even if it was lying in a place which was mutzna, in a protected, concealed area, you can put it in an exposed area. And if it was covered, you can uncover it. So what is the basis of the machlokes? Rashi explains as follows. The Torah says, the Torah gives us a chiyuv to protect the truma from possible tuma, that we have to protect truma, make sure that it's not tameh. Now, this din, everyone agrees, of course, that if it's truma tahira, it has to be protected. The question over here is, if there is truma which has a safek tuma, does it also have to be protected? Rabbi Elazar holds that even if it has a safek tuma, this still applies. It says, the way it's pronounced is trumoisai is the plural. So we darshan truma in the plural, truma tahira, and even truma, which is a safek tuma, it also has to be protected. So there still is a chiyuv to protect it. So therefore, you have to cover it, and you can't uncover it. But Rav Yeshua says that no, it's written, the ksiv of it is without the vav, in the singular. Therefore, the chiyuv to protect it is only by truma tahira, but not by truma tluya. So therefore, we have this machlokes, if there is a safek truma, do you have to protect her or not? So what is there, therefore, the comparison to our case over here? So over here we're saying that in the case of the chometz, it's chometz which is tameh, which is torah. Now what does that have to do with truma, which is safek truma, and do you have to protect it? Meaning the point is that Rabbi Yeshua says that truma which has a safek truma, the Torah no longer gives a chiyuv to protect it because it's going to be burnt anyway. So you see that once it's going to be burnt, we don't have a chiyuv to safeguard the truma. So here also, in our case as well, since we have a chiyuv now to burn the chometz, there's no chiyuv anymore to safeguard the truma and not from tuma, and therefore you can burn together the truma tahira and the tmeim. Back to Gemara, mi dami. How can you compare the cases? Hasam grama baum. Over there, Rabbi Yeshua is only matir a grama to do it not actively, to do with a grama indirectly. Meaning, you can uncover it, you can put an exposed area, but you can't actually be a dime, be matamed. Be a dime. Over here, Rameir says that you can be burned together, the tahira and the tmeya burned together, so be matamed, be a dime. So how can you compare the two cases? Now, this seems to be difficult because just like we were saying, and as the Marshal explains, that we're drawing an analogy between the case of Yeshua, which is only a suffix, to our case where it's Truma Tahira with Tameya, that you're doing it, the Tahira with the Tameya. But nevertheless, meaning the pshat is that since it's going to be burned, there's no chiyuv of a mishmeres to safeguard it. Well, if that's the case, what's the difference if it's biyadayim or if it's not biyadayim or it's a groma? If there's no chiyuv to safeguard it, then you should be able to be matam biyadayim. So then Yeshua explains, but perhaps midrabanan al kolpanim, that they wouldn't allow you to be matamet biyadayim as a getter. We would make a getter and say you can't be matamet mamish biyadayim. Ella, the Gemara says, "How Rabbi Yeshua with the following: Rabbi Yeshua desnan chavish shel truma shenishba begas al yaina." If you have a barrel of truma, and it's truma it's tahira, it's in the upper area of the wine press. They had the wine presses on two levels. The upper level they pressed it, and the wine, the juice flowed down to the bottom. So you have a barrel of the truma that's on the upper level of the wine press. Now on the bottom level is chulin, which is tome. Now chulin, which is tome, can be drunk. It can be consumed. Truma, which is tameya, cannot be consumed. Now you have the barrel that's on the upper level. The wine is flowing down. Now if the wine flows down to the lower level and it mixes with the chulin will be ruined and will not be able to be consumed. So Maide, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yeshua, they're both Maide Shim Yochel Hatzam and Revius B'Tahara. They're both Maide that if you can save a Revius of it with Tahara, meaning if you can go find a kli, a vessel which is tahar, and you're able to save at least a revius of this wine, and it'll be tahar yatzel, then he has to do it. He's obligated to do it. Meaning that if it takes some time to find the kli which is tahar, he has readily available to him kelim which are tmei. But if he saves the wine and the kelim which are tamei, he's going to make that truma tmei. Now, even though he'll save the wine from flowing down and ruining the chulin, but he'll be matama the truma. Now, if he goes and searches for a kli which is tahor, the wine will become flow to the bottom, ruin to the chulin. If he saves it in the kli which is tamei, he'll be matama the truma. So there are both maida that if by the time it takes him to go search for a kli which is tahor, even though he's going to ruin the chulin, but he'll be able to save at least a revius of the truma b'tahara, then he's obligated to do it. The chiyuv of saving, of safeguarding rather, mishmeres trumoisai, of saving the truma, obligates him to save it even if it's only the smallest shear, the most minimal shear, which is a revius. So if he's able to save it, he has the chiyuv of mishmeres trumoisai, and he must do it even though it's going to cause him a loss, and he's going to lose all of the chulin on the bottom because the truma will now flow to the bottom. It will become truma tameya when it mixes with the chulin, and it will ruin all of that. But nevertheless, since he can save a revius b'tahara, he must do it. But if he's not able to do it, if he searches around by the time he brings the kli which is tar, he won't even be able to save a revius, and the rest of it will ruin the chulin. Rabbi Elazar says you let it go and ruin the chulin. You can't be matamed biyad. You can't collect it and kill him which are tmeim and make the truma tome by your hand actively be matamed. Rabbi Yeshua says no, you could be matamed biyad. Meaning, because since it's all going to be destroyed anyway, if it flows down to the bottom, it's going to be now mixed with the chulin, and the chulin which is tome, and it's going to be end up tome. You won't be able to consume it. So since it's not going to be able to be consumed anyway, and you will not be able to save the shear, which is a revius, b'tahara, because by the time you find the kli which is tar, you won't be able to save even a revius of it. There's no chiv of mishmeres, and therefore we say, be metamed biyad, even actively be metamed biyad, collected in the kli tome, which is metam biyad, and not have it flow down to the bottom and ruin the chulin. So what do you see over here? You see that since it's going to be ruined anyway, it's not going to be able to be consumed anyway. You can even be metamed biyad, and even though this is truma, the wine is truma tahira, you can be metamed biyad because since it's going to be destroyed anyway, there's no chiv mishmeres. Similarly, on Erev Pesach, you can burn the chometz, you can burn the truma tahira with the truma tameya, because since midrabanan it has to be burnt now anyway, there's no chiv of mishmeres. So therefore, we can learn out from this din over here. What's medivrehem from their words? It's only from Rabbi Yeshua. It's not from Rabbi Lezer. So why say from their words? From their machlekes we can learn it out. It doesn't mean from their word, but from their machlekes. But really, it's following Rabbi Yeshua. Dekanami, and you can bring a diuk also that what he meant when he said midivreim, what he meant to say was from the machlekes of Rabbi Lezer Rabbi Yeshua, meaning from Rabbi Yeshua, because diktani, because the next segment of the Mishnah says that Rabbi Yossi argues, and he says, "Might Rabbi Lezer Rabbi Yeshua that there might that even though they argue elsewhere, but there might that the chometz, which is truma tahira and tameya, has to be burned separately." Now, what is this negea to our discussion? Shmami, no, you learn from here that Romer wanted to learn out from Rabbi Lezer and Yeshua. Rabbi Yossi says you can't learn out from them, but Romer was saying that's where you learn it out. Medivreim means from the machlekes of Rabbi Lezer and Yeshua. Rav Chanan asks in Kodesh Shurim that Rav Yeshua says if you can't save a revius b'tahara, then you can be metamed. Now, even if we say the shear of Mishmeres Trumaisai is a revius, that's the smallest shear of Chashiv, that's the shear of Mishmeres Trumaisai. But nevertheless, for Rav Elchanan, why shouldn't we say that even if there's less than revius, you still can't be metamed, you still have to protect it because Chatzi Shar Asam Torah. Just like we say that if a person who is Tomei, just so we say, if a person who's tomei, it's also for him, a kohen who's tomei, it's also to eat a chatzi shir of truma tahira. So similarly over here, we should say that even a chatzi shir of truma, to be matame truma tahira, it should be also. The chatzi shir also minatayra. So even if the shir of the chiv mishmeres is a revius, but why shouldn't we say even if there's less than a shir, then he still should have the chiv to guard it, to safeguard it, and not be matamed. Rav Chanan suggests that perhaps that the chiyuv of the mishmeres is to guard the truma so that you can eat it b'tar. The chiyuv of eating it, the chiyuv of achila is a revius, and there's no chatzi shir on the chiyuv on the mitzvah achila. Just like by the mitzvah of matzah, there's no chatzi shir. There's no chatzi shir on a half of a kazayas of matzah. We don't say chatzi shir on the mitzvah of eating matzah. There's no chatzi shir on the mitzvah of eating truma. And therefore, since the chiyuv of mishmeres trumaisa, safeguarding the truma, stems from the mitzvah achila, if there's no mitzvah achila unless than revius, there's no mitzvah mishmeres unless than revius. He says similarly, you can see the Mishnah of Chanias Gana Kahanim's case is talking where the meat of the Basar Kachim was at Avatuma Deraisa and of Latuma Deraisa, and the limit, Romer's limit, is not from Chanias Gana Kahanim, and my Medivreim is Medivir Rabbi Lezer Rabbi Yeshua. Rav Nachman, he asks a kasha, how can you say that it's not from Rav Chanina's Ganakanim, the Ramer is learning it out? Rav Yossi, and he says what you want to learn to is that you want to learn to chometz, learn it from your case to chometz, and Erev Pesach is not comparable. Rabbi is saying when they were made about the Kohanim in the base of Mikdash al Mahidu, what were they made on? Imal Basar Shenitma Vlada Tuma. If it's about a Basar that's Nitma with a Vlada Tuma, that they were made, they burned it together with meat that was burned, that was tummy with an avatuma. How can you compare it to the case of chametz and Erev Pesach? Is that tummy? Is that tummy? They're both tummy, so they're burning tummy with tummy, even though they're lesser, different levels of tuma, but they're both tummy. If it's about a shemen that became possible with a tul yom. So the shemen of truma is possible. So still, how can you compare it to our case? Even the truma that came into contact with the full yom, it's still possible. So how can you compare it to the case of Erev Pesach? Af anu maidim, we also agree with truma shenit b'velad tuma shesarfim in oisa im truma shenit b'ava tuma. Yes, or maida that if they're both tuma, so if you have truma that was nitma b'ava tuma with a truma that was nitma im vlada tuma, where they're both tame, yes, you can burn it together. Aval heich nisra b'tluyim atmeya, but how can you burn together even a tluya, even a safek with a tmeya? Certainly, as Rashi is saying, certainly a tor. How can you burn it with a tmeya? This is tor and this is tome. But even a tluya, which is a safek, how can you burn it with the tmeya? Maybe Eliyahu and Navi will come and say the safek is really tor. So how can we go ahead and burn it b'yadayim? Now he continues with something else. He says a pigel v'neiser v'atome. In a case of pigel neiser v'atome. Now these cases, the pigel and neiser, the chachamim were geyser tuma on pigel and neiser, that in order to make sure that the chachamim are careful not to be mefagal and not to bring something, not to have it come over the meat to stay over and become nicer, they were geyser on a tuma, that there's a tuma b'yadayim on if a person touches this meat. Now he says the pigel neiser atom beishamar they say ein nisrafim kachas, you can't burn it together. Beis Hillel nisrafim kachas. Beis Hillel says that you can burn it together. Beis Shammai says, since the Tomei Deraisa, you can't burn it together with something which is Tomei Derabbanan. Beis Hillel says you can. So that's a side halacha. But the point we want to bring out over here is V'isal Gadaytach Ramer Medivrei Yeshua Kamar. Now the way you're learning is Ramer was learning out not from a Chanis Ganakan. He was learning it out from a Yeshua. So Amaya Mahadale Rabbi Yaisi Medivrei Rabbi Yechaninas Ganakahanim. So then why is Rabbi Yaisi asking him from Chanis Ganakan? Rameir wasn't learning it out from there, and Rav Yossi is asking them, how can you learn it out from the case of the Beis Hamikdash, which is Tomei and Tomei, or Apostle and Tomei? How can you learn now to Torah and Tomei? Well, Rameir wasn't even learning out from a Chanis Ganakanim, so doesn't that show you that that's not the pshat in Rameir? So we'll continue Bez Hashem in the next year.